Very interesting topic area. I'm pleased to say that joining me on stage is an illustrious lineup of guests who are experts. I'll be asking them the questions, but they certainly are the experts in this field. So may I ask you all to have your questions ready, because you can help me question them. Now, we're going to be looking at the U.A.E. research landscape for clinical trials in rare diseases. May I please welcome back on stage a good friend of M42. I feel like he's my co-host because he shared the stage with me so often in this last day and a half, and I'm sure he has more sessions lined up as well. Dr. Mohammed El Amiri, the Department of Health, Abu Dhabi Section Head Studies and Special Projects. A big round of applause for Dr. Mohammed. That's enough contribution. We're going to get the names on the screen, so to ensure that everybody is, so yes, maybe the central seat for yourself. Dr. Arif Khan, who's a department chair of pediatric at the Eye Institute at CCAD. Thank you so much. Dr. Arif, please join us. Dr. Jion Toomey, who is the head of medical affairs at Novartis. And then Islam El Tawani, who is the general manager at IROS. Please do join us. And that is my full cast list. Please do take your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, give them a big round of applause. Joining us here at day 2 this afternoon. We've had a wonderful experience here at the inaugural Abu Dhabi Global Healthcare Week. I find that the audience has been a wonderful mix. Yes, we have experts, people who've been working in the health landscape for many years, but also we have new people to this industry as well, and people joining us online. So let's just first of all set the scene and the context. When we talk about clinical trials in rare diseases, if I may come to you first of all, Dr. Mohammed, what do we mean by rare diseases, and where does the U.A.E. stand at the moment on this?
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you for having me again. I really enjoy those talks. So when we say rare disease, we mean a disease that if you are like one in 200,000 people, usually that's the definition. However, rare is really common here because of the whole consanguinity in the region. So when we say rare, maybe rare in the world, but not here. It's really common. And
So give me an example. What would that be?
an example.
Or any of the panelists, get your mics ready. You can chip in. When we're talking about rare in the world, but not rare here, what do we mean by that?
What I mean is that there's like the percentage of people having rare diseases here is higher than the rest of the world.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and Dr. Arif might.
Yeah, I can give one example.
Yes.
Retinal dystrophy, retinal degeneration. This is a rare disease in the world, maybe 1 in 4,000. But I would say in this region, it's closer to 1 in 1,000.
1 in
There you go.
1,000. So that's a remarkable difference. Do we mean this region? Do you mean the GCC? Let's
I mean the
define terms.
GCC.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And so then that begs the question, when it comes to some of these rare diseases being more common here, popular here, is it the makeup of the population in terms of we've got expats from certain places in the world? Is that why? That particular example.
Well,
let's take that one.
In general, rare diseases are genetic diseases and are autosomal recessive diseases.
Sure.
And autosomal recessive diseases are more common when parents have a shared ancestry. When I say shared ancestry, they're either from a small founder population or they're from the same family or tribe. And because we have that historically in the U.A.E., some of these recessive genes, recessive alleles, which in other populations may not manifest because they're only in the heterozygous or single copy state, come in a double copy state or homozygous state, and that increases the expression of rare diseases in the region.
Fantastic. I know I've gone off script and I've asked these questions, but I'm learning a lot here. And I think that's really good for us to set the scene to ensure
Sure.
that everybody is on the same page. So we're saying that some of these rare but not so rare here diseases are actually, therefore, the imperative to cure them, to treat them, to diagnose them early is really significant here. So Dr. Mohammed, a follow-up question. When it comes to the U.A.E. and the regulatory and the facilities, where are we on that?
So usually to approve a new drug, for a certain rare disease. For a disease, it takes around 30 days. That's the turnaround time. However, for rare diseases, we usually expedite that for, and these are like special cases, to 8 days to approve a drug. Or if that drug, let's say, it's not really validated here, what we would do is we would push for compassionate use, and we've done that multiple times back in the years. So we consider rare diseases very very precious and important to us to expedite all of our regulatory elements.
Fantastic. It's great to have that underlined because it means a session like this is that much more crucial and vital for us to discuss. Dr. Gian, I saw you nodding there. When we speak about expediting the trials and the
Yes.
drugs that have been developed, give us your perspective on that. What are some of the challenges of developing some of the cures for these rare diseases?
Yeah, actually, as mentioned by Dr. Arif and Dr. Muhammad, a rare disease, they are often not well understood. And the limited number of patients, it makes it more difficult to study. So if we look closely to the challenges, we can identify three main challenges: clinical trial design, finding the right meaningful endpoint, and then the patient recruitment. So clinical trial design, our experts know that with the standard clinical trial design, we cannot really obtain meaningful safety and efficacy outcomes. And sometimes the fact that there is no treatment for this disease, we cannot use placebo. It's unethical, and you cannot do the right blinding. So here we need more creative trial design. We need to find the trial design like crossover studies, adaptive trial design, that can help us to achieve the objective, meaningful outcome and endpoint as well. It is not easy because usually to have the right endpoint, we need to understand the natural course of the disease. Here, it is lacking. We don't know exactly what the therapeutic success is. So usually it's based on a guesswork. And finally, the patient recruitment. Dr. Arif knows that it's very hard to find patients with rare disease. And they are dispersed, they are geographically everywhere, and they are often children. So here, the trial is, majority of the time, multinational, which is creating complexity around ethical review, around regulatory oversight. Added to that, the language, the culture, the different time zone. So really, we need to be patient whenever we are conducting a rare disease clinical trial. We need to be creative, but most importantly, lots of collaboration and alignment each must needed.
And I think you're absolutely right. I'm going to bring in Dr. Arif. I think Dr. Gian did actually tee
No,
you up very
I just
cleverly.
wanted to say about, rare disease by definition is rare, which means that most people don't have experience with it. So when these patients are out in the community, unfortunately, and not by the fault of the doctors, most physicians are not familiar. And diagnosis is often delayed, and these patients really go through a lot of frustration because by definition the condition is rare.
And as you say, so it's very challenging from a data collection point of view. As you say, it's very challenging from a patient point of view. How does one ensure that you are approaching the right sample, numbers of patients, and developing the research on that basis, Dr. Arif?
Yeah, it's challenging. You have to identify the patients and you have to genotype them. Let's go back to this example of retinal dystrophy, which I said is about one in 1,000 in the region. It sounds like it's one disease, but actually there are over 300 different causes for retinal dystrophy. So what we really need to do is identify these patients and understand what are the final common pathways that lead to the disease. Although the causes are different, there are final common pathways, and work on these pathways so that instead of finding a treatment for each individual condition, different genetic mutation, which is really not tenable because they're individually rare, collectively they're more common, and looking at the pathways and identifying them, and that's a way to get higher numbers and to help more people.
So I think this has been really interesting because we've set up some of the challenges. Dr. Mohammed, please come in.
I wanted to add to what Dr. Arif was saying, and this is why we have premarital screening. So we wanna prevent it from happening before it happens. And as Dr. Arif mentioned, it's mostly autosomal recessive diseases, and these are the diseases that we're really focusing on in our
Sorry, if you
premarital
bring the
screening.
mic this
Sorry.
way. So
The-
it's mostly focusing on, you were saying?
The autosomal recessive diseases that Dr. Arif was
What
mentioning.
does that mean for the layman?
Okay,
Like-
so these are the diseases that both couples have to be carriers of, so that 25% chance, there's a 25% chance of the offspring to have that disease. And most of rare diseases are those diseases. So, and this is why I mentioned consanguinity at the beginning. It's because of that, the high number of consanguinity, we have those diseases. And this is why we're focusing on from the beginning, at the premarital stage, on those diseases, so that these let's say the offspring or the child would not have those diseases.
Just very quickly, Dr. Mohammed is focusing on a very important point. He's focusing on prevention. And prevention is much more powerful than trying to treat these conditions. So understanding them, understanding what's happening, even if we don't have an intervention, we do have an intervention of prevention, which is much more powerful.
And it chimes with the M42 mission as well to, step in early, to have people before they become patients aware of the health landscape as well. Islam, I know that you've been very patiently waiting here, but I'm just going to, before we move on, because I think the issue that you bring up of the premarital screening is quite extraordinary when we talk about it in a kind of worldwide context, because we have an audience joining us online, perhaps across the globe, they're unaware of this. When did the premarital screening come in? And is it something that's universally embraced when it comes to the Emirati community?
So we've had premarital screening for a decade now, more than a decade. But what we did back in 2022, end of 22, we added the genetic component of it. So we've added more than 570 genes or more than 840 genetic disorder, autosomal genetic disorder to the screening of premarital, so that we can. So whenever we find, let's say, we call them incompatible, but they're not really incompatible, the couples where we identify recessive variant in both of them, and we would tell them, we would counsel them, and from what we've seen, a lot of people, more than around 50% of the couples, when they see that they're not compatible, they decide not to go ahead with marriage without any pressure, which shows how knowledgeable the population is, and the society. So that's I think that's an amazing thing that's happening within the country.
Yes, thank you for sharing that insight. And again, I think it's really good for us to unpack exactly what we're talking about. So I really do appreciate that. And that's a real world example. Now, we've been talking about the challenges. Let's move on to some of the opportunities. Islam, you've been there very patiently waiting. I want to bring you in with your expertise now. When we look at IROS and you're using the U.A.E.'s unique healthcare ecosystem to add value to researching rare diseases, bring us up to speed with that.
Okay, I will start from what Dr. Muhammad mentioned. So now we have some programs that is developed by the country here, like premarital screening, EGP, those programs that help us to face all the challenges that a CRO can face, like patient recruitment, like Jahel mentioned, or bringing even the clinical trial. So those programs help us as a CRO to can identify those patients easily, can find for them the clinical trial that suits them easily, and also with the collaboration of all the patient services team to provide them access to this treatment quicker and enroll them in the clinical trial. I believe the partnership we see here, and even through this panel with patient service and the regulatory and even the pharma, is what shows how this country is unique in providing this solution for the clinical trials.
And you say this country is unique, and we've heard that many times here on the M42 main stage, and also in conversations that we're having with experts across the healthcare landscape. Where does the U.A.E. learn from? Where is best practice when it comes to researching rare diseases? Or is it so unique it's actually creating the blueprint?
Look, I will take example not in rare disease, to be honest, but COVID.
Okay.
When we all were facing issues, this country stands and worked related to the research and the clinical trials for COVID and provided a vaccine for the people, not only for the country here, but also for different countries. And I believe shows how it is unique. And also the programs innovative programs like the EGP and the premarital screening, the program that was announced today related to genomic screening. And for IRIS, when we have a company like M42 having a CRO now that is working with all the stakeholders to get access to the clinical trial, bring back clinical trials here also in the country, and provide those, this will benefit the patients at the end. They will have early access to those medication. I believe this shows how it is unique.
So again, you're emphasizing that the expertise is something which is almost kind of homegrown. There's a collaboration of expertise here and also the international experts that are being collaborated with. So that's really intriguing and fascinating. That's from a kind of more broader point of view. Dr. Arif, would you also chime with this when we're speaking about yourself and your colleagues brought in from across the world for this expertise?
Yes, so I'm sorry, the question is?
Just about how the U.A.E. is very welcoming of international expertise.
Yes, of course, and of collaboration. And I think that's a very important point. Dealing with rare disease is not a one-person show. It really requires a lot of collaboration and working together from different aspects. And I have to say, the Emirati Genome Project has really been so helpful in helping patients and uncovering many things. And we have a retinal gene therapy program at Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, and it wouldn't be really possible without the support of the Emirati Genome Project to identify these patients. We've identified already more patients than expected for the population. Why? Because in the statistics for identifying from the population, they assume that not everyone is going to be identified. But we have a very high identification rate because we're really able to find these patients and genotype them better than the average country.
And I think that's really important. So I do appreciate you sharing that point, because as well as talking about the challenges, we should also celebrate what's being achieved. I know I've gone off script, but I find that the line of inquiry with you all is so fascinating. You're all experts, so I know I can speak to you more broadly. I'm going to bring in you, Dr. Gian Toomey, the Head of Medical Affairs at Novartis.
Yes.
We've talked about opportunities from these challenges. Please share what you want to celebrate and what you've achieved recently in this field.
Yeah, I would like to echo my colleagues here to see that there are several initiatives and already things done in the U.A.E. that we can build on. They are helping a lot already to conduct clinical trial in rare disease. There is also a room for collaboration more to implement a better and accelerate this trend. So what we are lucky to have already in the U.A.E, one, the infrastructure, a solid one with specialized expertise. We have many institutions offering state-of-art facilities with the research unit, as mentioned by Dr. Arif, and with genetic and molecular laboratories. We have even qualified centers for children. And then we have also funding initiative. The first one is the Emirati Genome Program, which is fascinating. The different grant and different funding initiative in the universities and also attracting companies to the U.A.E. specialized in genomic to work hand in hand with academic institution. All this, it is helping already to run clinical trial in rare disease. If I would speak about room of collaboration, I would say maybe within the update of the guidelines now, we can dedicate a specific section for a small patient population to stress, again, as mentioned by Dr. Mohammed, on the fast review, the fast track, the priority, especially when the disease area has a high unmet medical need. Also to show that regulators are open to clinical trial design, innovative, specific endpoint, unique, and statistical analysis that can accommodate a small patient population. We need also to encourage the collaboration between patient organization, researcher, and sponsor of clinical trials, and to include more the patient in the review process. So all this can really take it to the next level, and we can look at what's happening outside like what has been done with the FDA in collaborative agreement to work on the orphan drug designation program. It really improved a lot the picture, and we can say that during the 30 to 40 years, the number of orphan drug increased 4 times with those efforts globally. And we are very optimistic to have the same here in the UAE.
I love that note of optimism. It does give us a lot of hope. It's very empowering. I'm going to bring you in, Islam, to talk about your thoughts about optimism and opportunities. But first of all, does any of my audience have questions for our panelists, just so that we ensure that we share their time with you? Okay, so let's, Islam. So on that note of opportunity for the future.
I believe from the clinical trial perspective and CRO that the regulator will allow more early phase clinical trial. And I know that the regulator are working on this to have more access to phase 1 and even preclinical trials here in the country. And will open the door, like Jihad mentioned, to have some designation approval for rare disease for orphan drug, for some breakthrough medication that can get quicker approval and quicker registration, which will give access to this. And I know this is what I feel like optimistic about, that having those early phase clinical trial will make the process more quicker and will give access to our patient to more early medication.
I think that's a really powerful point. So maybe the last question, if I can put to you all, a very quick soundbite. We have people in the room who are very powerful, listening into this conversation. Your one call to action, all of you, on this topic of the UAE's research landscape for clinical trials in rare diseases, what would you urge? What would you like to see more of? What would benefit this particular field? Dr. Arif, if I may come to you first, the stage is yours.
Yes, sure. We're already moving towards it, but we really want to genotype all of these patients. And I would like to say that we've been talking about rare diseases and benefiting rare patients with rare diseases. But there have been several instances where understanding rare diseases has led to treatments or better understanding of common diseases. And we see that. So doing research and trials in rare disease not only is benefiting the rare disease, but it's also benefiting common disease, because we understand biological pathways better and how we can intervene and optimize health.
So a very astute point there. Rare diseases can actually lead to a greater benefit to mankind in general. So fantastic. Dr. Gion, your call to action.
Call to action, more registries. Learning from the experience, again, of the FDA, how they supported and empowered the patient organization to implement registry for more than 20 rare disease, and how really it changed the picture completely, and really being part of this adventure, all of us. I can see that now we are aligned on the messages, so I want this alignment to be translated into actions.
Fantastic, I love it. Alignment. Islam, because you know I'm going to be giving Dr. Mohammed the last word. So Islam?
Yeah, I believe collaboration, like the alignment that we have now, because no single stakeholder can do it alone. We need to have more of this, and this will bring more clinical trials, and I believe this will be the key.
Brilliant. Collaboration. Dr. Mohammed, first of all, major congratulations to what the Department of Health in Abu Dhabi is achieving with the collaborative effort. Your call to action, I guess, to your bosses.
So it might sound like a common sense call to action, but less rare diseases. So through prevention programs, this is what we want to see. Just less rare diseases within our population.
A very empowering and optimistic message to end on. Ladies and gentlemen, please give my panelists a big round of applause. They've shared so much with us today, a very comprehensive passion. And thank you so much for allowing me to go off script and actually answer all my questions. I really appreciate it. Let's take a photograph before I do release you back to your day. Thank you.
Good emceeing.
Thank you. Thank you for being so flexible. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Thank you.